Hey there guys, gals, and non-binary pals, it's DMG and welcome back to Blitz, and today we are going through a back to basics video on a map review of Winter Malinovka. This one is next in line after Himmelsdorf, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, Winter Malinovka, I would say, is another very balanced map. It's weird how these snow-covered maps seem to be some of the most balanced. I'm saying that in relation to Dead Rail, right? Dead Rail is a pretty balanced map, and I think that Winter Malinovka is actually a pretty balanced map for public games, at least. Competitive, it's a slightly different, but public games, you can work either side. Now, you have the lake area, and you have the sea area, or the windmill area, right? And then there's actually kind of like a middle area, which is kind of different into itself. Personally, just as a quick side note, I don't know how people drive over this frozen lake with a tank, right? I mean, wouldn't it break, right? Wouldn't the ice break under, I don't know how many tons the LTTB weighs, and it's considered a light tank, but I feel like it would easily, like this ice would break, right? But I don't know. Just my thoughts. Anyways, the A side is useful to support the C side. It doesn't work the other way around, but the A side is useful for putting pressure on, or how should I say this? Putting pressure on the C side through damage and caps. It's not like a Lost Temple where capping the valley base is only good because you can put cap pressure. You can actually put damage pressure and fire into through the A side. Now, this spot that I'm at is the spot that you guys should be going to first. I use this spot frequently. I think it's quite effective at seeing what the other team is going to do. You'll usually spot somebody if they're coming this way. Well, you'll always spot them unless they're sitting in the bushes across from you, right? However, this side's bushes are better, in my opinion, because this incline flattens out at the top, so it's easier to use tanks that don't have as good gun depression. So let's go to the other side and check that out just so I can kind of prove that to you. So that's the spot that I was at right there for the bushes, and if we go to the other side, right, the bushes are just slightly back a little more. I mean, you could still use these, but you're gonna have to poke out, get a quick shot, and then go back. So if you look here, I can't even get my gun down. When the most I can get my gun down is at these bushes right here, and this is the LTTB's second gun, so it has about 8 degrees of gun depression, 7 or 8, I forget. But you can see that on the other side, it's slightly flatter at the top, so you can abuse gun depression a little bit better and get a more consistent, reliable, damaging shot off on tanks trying to cross. Another good place to fight for this map is this corner area. This is like a Russian medium's bread and butter. This works in the E50M. This actually works in most mediums, actually, because all you're doing is poking, shooting drive wheels, or shooting sides, right? This is all about knowing reloads and being able to effectively put in fire. So this area is quite good. If you win this area, then you can, if you win and kill the mediums over here, you can then push like this and put in fire on all these people trying to sit in here if it does become a lake fight in that instance. Capping A is useful, and this is, of course, only specific to Supremacy. If you cap A, right, you put pressure by points. Then the other team has to push into C. But let's say if you're in a Leopard or any tank that has good gun handling, right? I showed a Type 62 mastery where an enemy Panther was sitting up here, and this is just super good because you can put in fire from here, and then you can cast your net to the other side and put in fire over here. And another good thing about this is that if enemy TDs are camping in the back, you'll be able to see them if they're spotted and get shots across. So like right there around, let me get out of these bushes because it's a little hard to see. So right there, there's some rocks and some boards, right? That's a common place where TDs like to sit, and you'll be able to fire at them. Same, I'm not sure if you'll be able to get the same kind of shots over there, but from this position, you'll be able to see the right side always in the tank destroyer position. So it's a great way to keep tank destroyers in check and out of the game, preventing them from sniping and supporting their team effectively. Another thing that is important is that if you are in a light tank or just something really fast and you don't think anyone's going to go to the lake side, right? You think they're all going to go to the BC side. This is most useful on, I would say, encounter, but it also is useful on supremacy, right? But it only works on this side, so keep that in mind. Or it only works coming from the south spawn, that's what I mean. So when you push, you can push all the way across and come to this location right here, and you'll be able to spot people driving across and put shots into them. This is super effective. Like, you'll be able to spot tanks around here, and then they'll cross right there, and you'll be able to fire a few shots in at them as they try and get to the C base. It only works coming from the south spawn. Going from the north spawn, it does not work as well. So if we try and mirror this right here, if I push all the way across, and then of course this is assuming that no one is going to the lake, or there's one tank going to the lake and you can deal with them later. You don't get the same kind of sight lines, right? So just keep that in mind. It doesn't work coming from the north spawn, but it does work coming from the south spawn. So just, I don't know, keep that on the back burner, right? I don't recommend always doing that tactic, but it does work. Excuse me. The spring, I don't know, spring flu could be getting to me a little bit. I don't even know. But this is the A side in a nutshell. Some other important things you can do on the A side or the lake is go to this location. If you can push into this location here, oh cripes, the time ran out. But if you can push into that location there, you'll be able to aggressively cut people off from sniping or trying to get to the corner, or using the spotting bushes in the lake to put in fire. So I'm just going to show that real quick. If we go to the A side and we try to push aggressively, I don't recommend doing this all the time. So usually I'll start here. I'll go to the spotting bushes first, right? And then I'll see if I can get a few shots here. And then I'll push up to this location right here. And I just showed this on the other side. So if you can work around this little ridge right here, you can put shots in at people over there, people over here. You'll always be able to, not always, but I'd say usually 9 times out of 10 be able to spot whoever's in these bushes. And you can easily push around into the back if people are trying to cap A. Same thing on the other side, right? So if you're on this side, you can put in shots up across there while still being relatively covered. You can put in shots over here if there's tank destroyers trying to sit near those rocks. You can see, you'll spot people in the bushes and spot people trying to abuse the ridge. You can see down these sight lines here, so if people are crossing or trying to sit there, you'll be able to shoot them. And of course, you'll be able to hit tanks trying to cap A early, thinking that it's a safe move. So that's another thing that you can do. The last thing that you can do, which is better for hull down tanks, because sometimes you don't always want to sit in that bush and be unspotted. Let's say you're in an M48A1 Patton, right? Or an M60 and you got some turret armor. It's better, well, I wouldn't say it's better, but sometimes it could be better to come up here and put in shots like this. Now, the LTTB can't do it, but tanks with high levels of gun depression, like the M60, are able to pull this off. Now, why is it important to be here instead of there? Because you're unspotted here, but you're spotted here. Well, the point is to be spotted. And by being spotted, you attract attention, right? So sometimes there is an advantage in being spotted and knowing something is there as you provide presence, right? So it's just making that judgment call of knowing what to do. Now, if you're in a leopard or something like that, definitely go back there. But if you have some turret armor, right, and you can weather a little bit of the storm while still putting in shots, it might be wise to sit here, because sometimes if you're sitting all the way in the back and they don't spot you, they'll still try and push into B because they're like, oh, it's just one shot, one lone shot. No one's going to try and shoot me again because I'll be in cover. But here, if you're spotted, if you shoot them once for them trying to cross into B, they're like, oh, okay, someone's there, so I can't push, right? So it's just playing on that psychological aspect of the game for being spotted and unspotted. It's just a judgment call, so keep that in mind. Now, the B side, or the BC, now, it's really hard to play AB, but you can play BC effectively because one is town area, I guess, or village, and then one is the lake. So, BC area is pretty darn good for competitive, actually. It's actually the side I always prefer to play whenever I make a competitive strat. But that's neither here nor there. So let's talk about the B area. This B area is perfect for good hull down tanks. Even Russian tanks can abuse this. It's good for really fast tanks, so you don't always have to go to the lake, right, if you're in a light tank. Light tanks can be effective in the B area really early game. So what do? You come from your spawn, and you can get into this bush right here, but I prefer this bush up here, right? This bush is neutral for both sides because, this side, this spawn has a bush, that spawn has a bush right there, but this bush is neutral. So if you can get to this bush right here, I keep saying bush, every 5 seconds. It probably gets annoying, but onwards and upwards, right? So if I'm in this brush, I will be able to spot tanks coming across, put a shot in, and immediately go behind cover. Take, for example, you're in a T-49, you can catch a side of like a Tiger P or something like that, right? So just keep that in mind. This could be quite useful. I go here frequently when we call the heavy side and I'm in a light tank, right? And I don't feel comfortable going to the lake by myself. So this is a very usable spot. This is something I really like about Winter Malinovka, as every cap has its own specific fighting area and they all kind of link together. So I would say this is one of the better maps in the game, but this bush is very, very effective. Now, another thing you can do is, if you are keen on capping B, you can go here, right? And try and cap B. Just immediately, if you're in like an IS-7, you can take an engine boost, push all the way up, get into B, and start capping the base. You'll be able to put in fire like this. And yes, your lower plate is exposed, but it's, again, a very small target. And then afterwards, you can use the enemy's brush and pop like this. This is a hull down position for an IS-7. This is a hull down position for a T-62A. This is a hull down position for a lot of tanks, so keep that in mind. Or this is a hull down position for almost any tank in the game. So you're on an angle, right? This is really effective as your upper front plate is on an angle going up and it's angled to the side. So it's almost creating like a double whammy of armor maximization, right? And you're popping and poking. This is frequently used in competitive, actually. I've seen this multiple times. But it is a very good public spot as well. Now, of course, if they get into B before you, you're kind of stuck here. So this is good for like an IS-4, E100, Mouse, something like that, that has a lot of HP and can weather the storm. So if they're in B and you need to dig them out, that spot over there is perfect. Of course, it's mirrored on both sides. So keep that in mind as well. You can use that spot from both sides. Now, the B area is quite decent. However, it does have some weaknesses to it, and we're going to go over a few spots for tank destroyers now. Because TDs actually kind of have a role in Winter Malinovka, because the one sniping spot that they're given, I know, right? One sniping spot. But the one spot that they're given is actually useful for multiple areas of the map. And it can be used for offense and defense. So, what is that one spot I'm talking about? Well, it's mirrorable on both sides again. And of course, it is up here. If you're in a tank destroyer, or a proper tank destroyer, and you're not going up here, you're doing it wrong. So, always be up here, right? You're not going to be spotted originally. No one's going to be firing blind shots because there's just so much open space. It's like there's such a high probability to miss, and then, you know, they could be spotted, right, from light tanks that are still trying to get to these bushes in the first place, and it'll make it really easy. So, this area is the best place for a tank destroyer. And yes, there's no bush, but there are rocks, so there's some hard cover that you can use if you need to reload. Well, not if you need to, when you reload, right? Now, how is this effective? Well, one, your first primary lane is this right here. And this exists on the other side too. There's some raised perch over there, and you can see where I'm aiming right now into this lane. Now, if your light tank spots something quickly, right? Let's say a bat chat goes into that bush right there, spots something quickly, and then backs away. If you're like in a 183 and you're side scraping out like this, and you put a shot, you can put a HESH round across really early game. And those are the shots that change games, right? If you can make it a 6 versus 7 at the start of the game, guys, that is just game changing, right? Now, it's also, this spot is also good for like a grill or a waffle because it's a rear mount, right? So keep that in mind. But this is your primary lane early game. Now, something else that happens is that if enemies go to these bushes right here, right, and try and spot, or that bush, they will spot you, of course, but hopefully you'll spot them, and when they fire, it's your job to nuke them, right? Because as a tank destroyer, you will most likely have more alpha. So keep in mind that this is, for me, tank destroyers are all about having the alpha in general. This is kind of a side note. But if you're like in an AT-15A, right, or a Tortoise, right, this isn't going to be as effective for you because you're more about DPM than putting as much hurt as possible with one shell, right? So if you're like in an ISU, this is great. You're in an AT-7, not so great. So just keep that in mind. Now, you have your primary lane in the original game, you have the bush then, and then you have the bush there, and then you also have people trying to fight it out at B, so this little area right here, people will try and push through. If this is encountered, the cap is by this church over here, so people will sometimes try and push through and get into the cap. I don't know why, I mean, it's Blitz, right? People will try and cap early, so keep that in mind. Your second objective is if your C side starts getting pushed, and this could be on encounter, it actually works better on encounter because people fight for the windmill, right? And your heavies start backing off, and if they start pushing around the windmill, it's your job to nuke people out the corner of the windmill, people pushing out here, and people coming around this corner right there. So if you are in that situation, you can sit here and get cover with the rock, or you can go all the way back here, and this is what I prefer to do, is if they're all pushing on the C side, I can sit here, right, and I'm slightly more hull down, I'm exposing less of my tank, it's easier for me to retreat to cover, right, and I'm still able to put shots across. I actually have more of an angle at the windmill in this area. So keep that in mind, and you'll also be able to see drive wheels a little easier as people poke around the corner here, so they won't have to fully poke to, or what was I going to say? They won't have to fully poke for you to be able to shoot them. So another good thing to keep in mind, but this up here is still usable in a pinch, and you also have some hard cover, and in the event that they do poke like this, right, you're definitely going to get a clean shot because their side has to be exposed, whereas here, right, you get more of an angle on this corner, and you can just see their drive wheel. So keep that in mind. Now, if they all push the lake side, if you're in a tank destroyer, and this is actually where a Jagdtiger or a Tortoise may be kind of helpful, right? A 183 won't be as helpful because it has poor gun depression, right? So you can sit here on this ridge, and when they start pushing over, you are that brick in front of them that they must get through. And it's very difficult because usually there'll be people near B, or there'll be people up by the windmill, and they'll start rotating back. So it's actually a pretty quick rotation back here. And it's very difficult to try and break this down. If you're in a Tortoise, right, you can just sit here and spray people. People will come through this open area. And keep in mind, when people are flanking and from the lake area, that's what you should be doing. You should be trying to flank over and get shots into heavies. So what I mean by that real quick is if I started at the red spawn and I flank all the way through here, right, I eventually want to end up right here, right where the tank destroyer hull down position is, and start putting in shots at all the people sitting here in this area, because it happens frequently. Now, but in order to prevent that from happening in the first place, if you're in a tank destroyer, you can sit here and just spray DPM at people. And usually, let's say if you're in a Jagdtiger, your superstructure is strong enough to the point where you can just sit here and just bounce shells. And this corner area is quite open. Now they have to poke around the house, they have to come around here, right? It's not extremely safe. Now there are spots you can use. I'm not really going to go over those as they're not as important, and you have to have specific kinds of armor profiles to use them, but there are certain spots you can haul down there. But this is a great counterplay to a long flank. Someone actually did this to me and just sat here because they knew I was going to flank. They recognized me. They saw me in a light tank or like a medium tank or something like that, and they just sat here. And as I came around, they shot me, and they weren't even sitting in a tank destroyer. They were sitting in a heavy tank. So they were ready, right? So it's a very, very good position to use. And lastly, we're going to go over the seaside, but the clock is running out of time. So let's just let the clock run out and we will get into the seaside. But as you can see, Winter Malinovka is such a balanced map, right? I just went over the A and B part, and I haven't even gone over the heavy channel, which I would actually say is not too complicated, but it's still usable. Or very usable, actually. But there's so much to this map. I would say it's almost like a mini Castilla, right? Because there's so many different things you can do on Castilla. In the same light, there's so many different things you can do on Winter Malinovka. So, onto the heavy side. If you are in a heavy tank, C or B is where you want to be going. I mean, you can play A if you guys just all want to bum rush the lake and kill whatever's over there and then play from there. That's fine. But if you want to play the B or the C side in a heavy tank, and everyone starts going to C, where do you want to be? So my favorite position, because I know angles, right? I've learned this the hard way a lot of times about how to angle here. I've been penned a lot of times. This is not a good angle. That's still not a good angle, right? You know, I've learned for me, this is one of the most classic side scraping positions. Like, this is how I learned to side scrape in the Tiger 2. Going to the E75, right? Because if you screw up at all, you're getting penned. But if your angles are perfect, you're impenetrable. This is how I learned the IS-6, right? I've gone to this spot so many times. You just side scrape out, and you put shots across into here. And people will always try and poke on you, and they'll try and side scrape, and then it becomes a war of who has better technique, who can aim better, who knows what the premium ammunition is, right? And unfortunately, that's just part of the game, but hey, you know, don't be afraid to use it if you have to. So, side scraping here and putting shots across. It's better for rear-mounted tanks, but I've done this in an IS-6 so many times. I've done this in a low so many times. You know, this is almost reflexive, right? And something that you have to be careful of in this spot is that if you get here first, and the idea is to get here first before any of your teammates or any of the other teams starts crossing, right? Is that when you start side scraping, you'll actually block your teammates, unfortunately, early game. So try to be cognizant of that so you don't block your teammates. But then again, teammates sometimes, like when you're trying to side scrape out, I've been trying to side scrape in an IS-6, and then another heavy tank came out full speed, and hit my side and actually turned my tank like this, and I ended up getting nuked. So just be very careful about how you side scrape. Another position to use is to push all the way across. If you're in a fast heavy tank or you think you can get here, go here. This is great for the E5, Carnarvon, M103, stuff like that. You can also go here in an IS-7, right? Doesn't really matter. Heavy tanks are all good around in this location. You can also go around to the windmill, right? Good for side scraping heavy tanks, stuff like that. So there's so many different locations you can use in this map, but those are the main two for heavy tanks. Now, if you want to counter the heavy tank locations, you can push all the way up here, right? And you can get a small angle on side scraping heavy tanks and put shots across. This works for both sides, but again, I can see you and you can see me, so you're each easily pennable. It doesn't work on this side as much, so it only works on this side. So actually that's my fault for saying that it does work on both sides. It doesn't. It only works on this side. You can get a very slight angle on heavy tanks that are trying to side scrape there and put shots across. Of course, if you're in a tank destroyer and you end up coming over here, right, you can always just sit here, up here. I mean, you can get a full view of the map and be able to put in shots. So just something for your knowledge. That's something I just realized and I want to try. I don't think it'll work, but it's worth a try. Nope, it's not going to work. But that's Winter Malinovka in a nutshell. Good side scraping heavy positions, good haul down positions, good flanking maneuvers can be performed on this map. So if you liked that content, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you didn't, please leave your constructive criticism in the comment section. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to share my passion with you today, and I hope to see you next time.